You're listening to India Bio Speaks, your one-stop resource for science, news and careers. Dear listeners, in this special episode addressing mental health in academia, India Bio Speaks revisits excerpts from a discussion that happened on September 11th, 2020. This discussion addressed issues around mental health, particularly those that are relevant to PhD students and postdocs. Featuring Shubha, Tole and Soumitra Pathare as panelists. This discussion was moderated by Karishma, Kaushik and Mayuri, Rege. Enjoy listening.
I'm Karishma. I'm a Ramalingaswamy Fellow at University of Pune. So how did this webinar idea, this series come about? This has been a conversation amongst us colleagues in science in India. And thank you to the India Bioscience team and Mayuri and our panelists for joining us for this session. So I transitioned to academia rather late, I would say, after medical college and residency. And I do believe that it was this advanced age and my family that helped me maintain my enthusiasm and passion for academia and think of it as a career. While all of us will have different challenges and different solutions, we do think it's a good place to start talking about what these are. And joining me is Mayuri.
Hi, everyone. I'm a DST-inspired faculty at Ruia College in Mumbai, and I apply bioengineering tools to study how genes are controlled. So frankly, when Karishma asked me if I would like to be a part of this discussion, this is her brainchild, I was hesitant because I didn't really know anything about it. But after educating myself, I've come to appreciate that this is a complex and pervasive issue that needs an India-specific dialogue. So in a way, I think I bring the perspective of the uninitiated PI, those who have, who know how to do good science, but haven't been formally trained to address mental health issues. Now I would like to introduce the first speaker for today's session, Dr. Shubha Tole. She is a neuroscientist at the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, where she has made seminal contributions to understanding early brain development. In her 20 years at TIFR, she has published in international journals, been awarded prestigious prizes, including the Bhatnagar Award and the Infosys Prize. But most relevant for today's discussion is the fact that she has trained graduate students and postdocs who are now established scientists in their own right. Shubha is a vocal advocate of women in science, and I think one of the few people willing to have an open discussion about topics that most would not even dare talk about. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on mental health in academia with this forum today.
Thank you, Mayuri. That was a wonderful introduction, and Shubha, nice to have you here. Our second panelist is Dr. Soumitra Pathare. So Dr. Pathare is an acclaimed psychiatrist across India, and he works and practices in Pune, and he's the director of the Center for Mental Health Law and Policy. And I will say that I interact with him on Twitter, and his Twitter profile has truly brought mental health out into the open as a discussion in our society at large. So very excited to have you, Dr. Pathare, and we look forward to your inputs on our special concerns with mental health amongst PhDs and postdocs in Indian science.
Thanks, Karishma. Thanks, India Bioscience, for asking me. Looking forward to it.
So Mayuri and I went back and forth with this, and we've come up with a structure. Our first is academia and mental health, and then we'll talk about managing mental health. So we sent out a little survey to our registrants and the community. And when it came to academia and mental health, unsurprisingly, there were two big things that popped up. One is the supervisor dynamic while doing a PhD, and the lab environment during one's stay in academic training. And when it came to the supervisors, there were some keywords. They were work pressure, they were project pressure, projects not working, workload, setting expectations, hierarchy versus respect versus deference, and this whole power dynamic, the power imbalance that exists when your degree and your training is pretty much at the hands of one person. Dr. Shubha, with that, setting that up, I'll start with you. You've trained lots of PhD students and postdocs. When one is in that situation, like one is right now, all our audience, how does one go about some key factors that could help, like setting expectations and managing the power dynamic while being respectful and yet being able to maintain regular, clear communication and expectation?
So thank you. Thank you, everybody, for doing this. So let me say at the outset, I'm a little humbled that I'm a panelist on this, because I figured out some of these answers on my own as I went along, and I think I think mentors should do better. So, please take everything I say as a sort of self-learning and an evolution process. I don't have answers, and I'm happy to be corrected, and I'm happy to learn in the process of doing this, from the questions. I think the first thing that a PI needs to recognize is that there is more to science than the experiments and the research, that the overarching job is to train the individual, the human being who's come to your door with fire in their eyes and, energy and, a young mind saying, hey, train me. The most precious privilege is that this person has come to your door and offering all of this. They have to leave your door rewarded, fulfilled, feeling that the experience gave them something. And they have to go on to be, they have to feel enabled to being a contributing human being. Whether they stay in science, whether they do something else, whether they have discovered in the process of being in your lab that they would so much rather be, doing science communication or something, they have to go away feeling the experience was enriched, and they have to go ahead and, we're training the next generation that will contribute to human society, and that is the job. The experiments are, part of what people are doing in the lab, but that's not the overarching goal. And when we begin to recognize that, so appreciating that is the first step. We're not trained for this. We're selected for our jobs based on our papers, pretty much. We receive no training in how to deal with different personality types. We receive no such, we learn to become PIs on the job. And so in some sense, I'll take this opportunity to thank the students and postdocs who trained me in just being your diverse, wonderful selves. If a PI is even a little bit open-minded to recognizing that people come into life with different perspectives, and each individual starts from a different place, needs a different kind of, encouragement, challenge. For some people, challenge is super. For some people, challenge is intimidating. For some people, independence is a fantastic, nourishing thing. And for some people, independence is, oh, my advisor doesn't pay attention to me. So, one has to be tuned to the nuances of the individual, and the same answer may not apply to the same individual 1 year to the other. So if you center the thoughts that this is an individual who has put themselves in my space in a position where, what I say matters a lot. Okay. If one is forever aware of that. Okay. A student asked me on WhatsApp once, the student was struggling with whether, I will use gender neutral, whether they were meant for science. Okay. They were struggling with, what it is they wanted to do. They were in a mental health crisis. Mm-hmm. And this comes on WhatsApp. Students will communicate with any medium, right? Do you think I'm meant for this? Okay. And it was late at night, and the blue tick meant I had to answer. You can't be silent on this. And what you answer has it's just a little text. Okay. But it's the most responsible thing. So, at that point I said, well, I think you can do whatever you decide you want to do, and I will help you figure this out. Okay. It has to be an enabling answer. This person went on to be one of the most tremendously charged and creative students I've seen.
I think basically a relationship between a PI and say the PhD student or the grad student or whoever, it's a relationship. It's like any other relationship. The real challenge and every relationship really takes two to tango. So I wouldn't kind of try to put the blame on one side or the other. And very often the challenge is not whether one person is right or wrong. I think it's the lock and key logic. Does this key fit this lock kind of a thing? That does not make the lock wrong or the key wrong. It's just that if you're not getting that fit, what can you do about it? And those are the real challenges. So I think getting that lock and key fitting well is a challenge. And for supervisors, actually that's a hard job, because every 3 or 4 years, they have to create another new relationship with another. Imagine you're the lock, and every 3 years there's a new key trying to fit into it. and you have to adjust to it. I mean, it's a real challenge, isn't it? It's not easy, and vice versa. So I think there's a need for recognition on either side that this is something that requires both sides to make a little bit of an effort to go out of their way. And I think in that sense, then formalizing those relationships and formalizing those expectations is actually a good thing. I also think that a lot of these skills can be learned. Okay, they don't, like Shubha said, that you should just learn on the job. And I think that while that's great when you learn on the job, but I think a lot of this stuff can be learned. And I would really look at Indian institutions putting in place a good, induction program, not only for the trainees, but also for their supervisors, so that the supervisors know when they start what is expected of them, how are they going to be doing it, what is fine, what is not fine. Is it fine for my student to text me at 10 p.m. saying I'm feeling desperate? Am I expected to reply or am I not expected to reply, for example? So what are the boundaries? What are the boundaries that are acceptable? What are the boundaries that are not acceptable? So I think, I think our institutions need to take up this challenge and have a good induction program. What we currently seem to have is we just take two people and drop them into the pool and hope they will learn to sink and swim or whatever happens to them. And if it works, great. If it doesn't work, then you say, bad, really bad. But we don't actually kind of, imagine putting people into the water when they don't know how to swim. I think that's just completely unrealistic. So I think there's a lot that we can do institution-wise as well as individual-wise.
Thank you, Dr. Pathare. There were two key takeaways. One is we have to understand from the supervisor's perspective, right? You're constantly trying to fit a new student, a new trainee, and it's a two-way dynamic. Also, what expectations are, they have pretty much never set, Like Shubha said, you learn them on the job.
One of the other issues that came to the fore was not having the ideal lab environment. And here I mean something that is not conducive for you to carry out your research. So it might be something as small and localized as discrimination, whether that's for a particular gender or for a particular age, somebody who has a family or not. Lab environments naturally include your peers because they are the ones that you depend on, but also there's going to be competition or at least a sense of competition. So poor lab culture could also hamper research in the sense that you have some level of bullying or harassment. And finally, there is the individual imposter syndrome that hurts your research. Constantly questioning yourself, are you really, as Shubha said, meant for this? So do we have any suggestions for students on how to deal with issues related to the lab environment?
I think the lab environment very often, here I would squarely put the responsibility, a large chunk of the responsibility on both the institution as well as the person who's heading the lab. I really do think that institutions need to set a certain culture and the heads of the labs need to then kind of imbibe and promote that culture. That does not mean that that students, peers, and others don't have a role to play in it. But I do think that the largest chunk of the role is really played by your mentor, supervisor, whatever you call them, or the head of the lab. And we've seen this all along. People follow the lead that is given by the person who, and then we are a hierarchical society. So if you've got a head who is discriminatory, or if you got a head who makes fun of people, then you find everyone joins into that because you want to be seen to be close to the power. So that happens all the time. So I think really the focus has to be on the supervisors and the institutions. And again, these are all real things. Okay, discrimination is real. It exists, and all forms of discrimination in our Indian culture. There's gender-related discrimination. There's sexual orientation discrimination. There are issues around caste, for example, which don't get talked about, and that's another big ground for discrimination. And very often the discrimination is not overt. Sometimes the discrimination is very subtle and covert. And the person can feel it, but nothing is being said or done. where they can pinpoint and say, oh, you did this, which was discriminatory. And so, those kind of covert actions happen quite often. And the imposter syndrome thing, look, I mean, I really, this is what I would tell everybody. I started my PhD when I was 31. Okay, I kind of struggled on it and worked on it for 4 or 5 years in the UK. And then I decided this was not for me. I'm going to quit. I left it. I returned to India and started off doing some work. And gradually we built up a team where I work at the center. We now have close to 60 people working for us. Okay. And then in 2011, I went back and did a PhD and completed my PhD in 2014. So you can come back to, I was nearly 49 when I completed my PhD. That's completely fine. So it's okay if you feel you don't know, you want to get out and maybe come back to it again afterwards. I remember my father saying then is that why are you doing your PhD now? You're 49 on the wrong side of the fence. And I said, no, I need to complete it. I'll close it out. It's closure. But the point I'm trying to make is it's okay. I mean, there's nothing like failure in these things.
Mm-hmm. Shubha?
I think Soumitra said it so really well. I'll just give my 2 bits. I think negative, disabling environment in the lab is just an antithesis to science. I mean, we all come to science to pursue the truth. And if in the lab you have all of these things that are playing out that are just unacceptable and unfair in any space, let alone science, you're just running an unprofessional workspace. So, I mean, just from the basics of, human beings should treat each other courteously, and individuals have the right to be who they are, and people have the right to be, have their own, personality traits. I don't like working late at night. I get my best work done in the morning. Is a workspace related preference, or I don't like people borrowing my reagents or my solutions. These are all workspace things that these small things that can be used to just make people feel bad about themselves. Some newbie comes in and uses a reagent, and somebody says, "Who told you to take this?" It's just the way you talk to somebody, right? You can make them feel intimidated. It can start really small, and if anybody feels okay treating anybody like this, then, forget about LGBT and, people who are struggling with bigger issues in life. How are you going to be accepting of people's life choices if you cannot interact reasonably, courteously and professionally with somebody who is new in a lab and didn't know which bottles to take and what to share and what not to share? So I think under the overarching principle of treating people professionally and courteously, that being a necessary part of lab interactions, would sort of address all of these, except imposter syndrome, this continuous feeling of being inadequate, this continuous feeling of being not right for the job. I should say I have a good deal of it now. I'm wondering of all the people who are better trained in this, who didn't figure it out sort of on the job by themselves. They invited me, by God, let me please say something useful and not waste everybody's time. Let me please not say something so obviously ignorant because I haven't figured it out yet. Okay, these are my thoughts today, now. Okay, no amount of publications and so on makes it go away. And a little bit feeling inadequate in the right way is perhaps a healthy approach to science. One can never be arrogant and confident about it, right? We're here to try and pursue and uncover something that is so much bigger than us. Of course, we're not going to be stupendous at it. So in some sense, we come into science signing up for a life of continuous struggle and things not working. When I welcome students at TIFR, I say science is for half mad people. I should probably use a more politically correct word. Mayuri, I don't know how we welcome you at TIFR, but I basically say, what do? We struggle with something that doesn't work and doesn't work and doesn't work. And we feel depressed, it's not working. We take it upon ourselves. We're not good enough because the experiment is not working. Everybody else's experiments have worked, And then it works. And do we revel in it? Do we keep doing what has worked? No, We write it up, publish it, and then we go and do the next thing that doesn't work. So we are self-selecting for continuous struggle and potentially continuous disappointment and dejection. No, I mean, this is what we have to live and feed on. The struggle is what should nourish us.
Mm-hmm. So just to quickly summarize, I think the points of this. I think one is imposter syndrome is everywhere and at every level. Recognize it and just face it head on and blindly. I think
live with it and live with it.
Live with it. I think yes, like coronavirus.
Do what you have to do anyways.
And the second thing is a proper lab environment is largely something that comes top down, and so PIs have a very large role in ensuring that. And of course, making sure that the professional environment is maintained and it is not, anything else is not tolerated, I think is the attitude to be taken.
How do we approach a PI if there is a toxic lab environment?
Do what you can live with. Finally, you have to sleep at night. 10 years after you leave the lab, will you be glad you did something, or will you be, will you wish you hadn't? So it's a match of what fits your personality. A lot of us are trained to accept, I want to use a bad word there, accept stuff. Okay, we are trained to accept it from our seniors. Let's not speak, let's be quiet. If you have been programmed like this from childhood, speaking up is not going to be comfortable for you, right? And you may be unhappy with yourself for doing it. So this is not a one size fits all. Do if it is comfortable for you, if it is your time in your own personal evolution to step out of those boundaries and say, these are my rights. We need to discuss this. This is important to me. Then do. Then there's the PI. Is he or she receptive? Okay. Most human reaction to a negative comment or a criticism is defensive. Okay. What do you mean this? Or oh, you're being sensitive. Oh my God, the number of times that is flung around. You turn it back at the other person. Be prepared to hear this because that person is human too, right? They should be better, but they are what they are. So it's a decision on whether the person is going to be open enough and whether you are ready to speak up. But if the stars align, do. Let the person know, maybe write a note saying these are issues that are worth thinking about and can we discuss them either in private or in a lab meeting. If you feel uncomfortable signing your name to the note, write it as a collective. I'm not greatly in favor of anonymous notes because, you see the person every day, right? They know it's one of you. But write it as a collective with people. Because if you want to improve the environment, anonymous notes are not going to help. They're going to vitiate it more, right? So
very true. It becomes a rant.
Sorry?
It becomes a rant then.
An anonymous note is, you're too cowardly to actually say something. If you're not ready to finally sign your name to it and meet the person face to face, then don't do it.
Exactly. And the goal is to make it better. The goal is constructive.
So request a visiting of these issues. Okay, and maybe give the person time to think about it. And do it if you're ready and if you think they're ready. So this is not a one size fits all. Loop in thesis committee members, department chairs, other PIs, senior postdocs from other labs,
I think, thank you for that.
So listeners, that was part 1 of the conversation. Hope you enjoyed listening to it. In part 2 of this discussion, we will talk about managing mental health. Please also check out several curated resources on mental health on the India Bioscience website. You will find a link to these on the description section of this podcast. Stay safe, stay informed, and stay healthy. See you soon. If you're passionate about scientific research, communication, outreach, and science education as we are, please connect and engage with us, and here are some ways that you can do so.
Visit our website at www.indiabioscience.org.
Subscribe to our newsletters.
Write for us and join our online discussion forum at discuss.indiabioscience.org.
Advertise jobs, grants and events in the life sciences on our website.
And feel free to contact us anytime at hello@indiabioscience.org.
Until next time, enjoy your science and stay engaged to enable change.